Hello, dear friends. Today's destination? An island that stood up to the most powerful country in the world. And it didn't back down. Right, Jacob?
Well said, Joy. For over 60 years, we are talking about Cuba. And just like our other episodes, we'll explore this story together. And while we do, you'll pick up some really useful English words naturally. No studying, just relax and listen.
Welcome to New English Podcast. Let's start our journey. So, Jacob, where exactly is Cuba?
Cuba is an island in the Caribbean Sea, just 150 kilometres from the coast of Florida, the United States. So close you can almost see it.
Caribbean. Friends, the Caribbean is a region of warm tropical islands between North and South America. Think turquoise water, white sand beaches, warm weather all year round.
And Cuba is the largest island in the Caribbean, with about 11 million people. The capital is Havana, one of the most famous cities in the world. Famous for its colourful colonial buildings, its music, its classic American cars from the 1950s still driving on the streets today.
Yes, and I love them. We'll explain why those cars are still there later. It's part of the story.
Now, let's go back to the beginning. Cuba was home to indigenous peoples for thousands of years. And then, 1492. Christopher Columbus arrived. He described Cuba as the most beautiful land human eyes had ever seen.
Beautiful, and soon colonized. Spain took control of Cuba and ruled it for almost 400 years. 400 years of Spanish rule. The indigenous population was almost completely wiped out. Enslaved Africans were brought to work on sugar plantations.
Okay, let's take a look at these two words. Plantation, a large farm where crops like sugar, tobacco or coffee are grown, usually using forced labour.
And wiped out, when something or someone is completely destroyed or eliminated. Almost nothing remains. It's a strong expression, and sadly, it describes exactly what happened to Cuba's original population.
Cuba became one of the world's biggest sugar producers, and sugar made some people very rich and kept many others in terrible poverty. Poverty, the state of being extremely poor, having very little money, food or resources.
And then, independence movements began. Cuban people wanted to be free from Spain. One name stands out above all others, José Martí, a poet, a writer, a revolutionary. He dedicated his life to Cuban independence.
He died in battle in 1895, but his ideas lived on. And in 1898, something unexpected happened. The United States entered the war against Spain, and Spain lost. Cuba was finally free from Spanish rule.
Well, almost free. The United States took control of Cuba after Spain left, and for the next decades, American companies owned most of Cuba's land, sugar, banks, and utilities.
Utilities, essential services like electricity, water, and gas. Americans owned 90% of Cuba's essential services. Cuba had independence on paper, but in reality, it was deeply controlled by American interests.
And then, the 1950s. A dictator named Fulgencio Batista ruled Cuba. Corrupt, brutal, backed by the United States.
Corrupt. When someone in power uses their position dishonestly for personal gain. Batista was famously corrupt.
Cuban people were suffering. Poverty was everywhere. and a young lawyer named Fidel Castro had had enough. On July 26, 1953, Castro led an attack on a military barracks.
It failed. He was captured and imprisoned. But failure didn't stop him. In 1955, he was released. He went to Mexico, and there he met an Argentine doctor named Ernesto Che Guevara.
Che Guevara, friends, one of the most iconic revolutionary figures in history. His face is still on T-shirts around the world today. Iconic, so famous and recognizable that it becomes a symbol of something bigger.
In December 1956, Castro, Guevara, and 82 fighters sailed from Mexico to Cuba on a small boat called the Granma. Batista's forces were waiting for them. Most of the group was killed or captured.
Only about 20 survived, including Castro and Guevara. They escaped into the mountains, the Sierra Maestra. And from those mountains, they launched a guerrilla war. For 2 years they fought, and slowly they gained support from the Cuban people.
Guerrilla war. It is a type of war where small groups of people fight a bigger army. They attack quickly, surprise the enemy, and then run away. Batista's army was losing. His support was collapsing. And on January 1st, 1959, Batista fled Cuba.
The revolution had won. Castro entered Havana on January 8, 1959. The crowds went wild. There was real hope. Finally, after years of corruption and suffering, change had come.
And at first, even the United States recognized Castro's new government.
Yeah, but that didn't last long. Castro began nationalizing American companies in Cuba, taking control of land, banks, businesses, and giving them to the Cuban state.
Nationalizing, when a government takes control of private companies or land and makes them public property.
The United States was furious. And in 1961, they broke off all diplomatic relations with Cuba.
Diplomatic relations, the official connection between two countries, embassies, ambassadors, communication. When you break them, you are essentially saying, we are no longer talking.
And then, April 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion. The CIA trained around 1,500 Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. It was a disaster. The invasion failed completely. Castro's forces defeated them in 3 days. And it actually made Castro more popular inside Cuba. Nothing unites a country like a failed invasion from outside.
And then, October 1962, the most dangerous moment of the entire Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis.
The Soviet Union, Cuba's new ally, had placed nuclear missiles on the island, pointed at the United States. Nuclear missiles, 150 kilometres from Florida. The world held its breath for 13 days.
The United States and Soviet Union negotiated, and finally, the missiles were removed. The world exhaled. It was the closest the world has ever come to nuclear war.
And the embargo, the trade embargo that the United States placed on Cuba, it is still there today, over 60 years later.
Let me explain embargo for our friends, an official ban on trade with a country. The US embargo means American companies cannot do business with Cuba, and Americans cannot easily travel there.
Right, Jacob. And this is why those old American cars are still on the streets of Havana. After the embargo, Cuba could no longer import new cars from the United States, so they kept the old ones running.
maintained for decades by incredibly skilled Cuban mechanics. Necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. A great English expression. It means when you really need something, you find a way to create it. The Cubans couldn't get new cars, so they became experts at fixing old ones.
That's a useful one indeed. Anyway, Fidel Castro ruled Cuba until 2008, when illness forced him to hand power to his brother Raúl. Fidel died in 2016. He remains one of the most controversial figures of the 20th century.
Controversial, causing strong disagreement. Some people see Castro as a hero who stood up to American power and brought education and healthcare to ordinary Cubans. Others see him as a dictator who suppressed freedom. The truth, as always, is complicated.
And Cuba today, what is it like?
Well, here too, the answer is not that simple. And honestly, as an English learning podcast, we can't go too far expressing our opinions on certain situations. But what we can say is this: it is a country facing real challenges. Economic difficulties, limited freedoms, and with recent events, especially what happened between the US and Venezuela in early 2026, Cuba has found itself in an even more difficult position. Venezuela was Cuba's main oil supplier, and that supply was suddenly cut off.
Oh, that's very sad to hear, Jacob. Friends, what is oil? The fuel that keeps a country running. Literally. Anyway, Cuba has an extraordinary culture, extraordinary people, extraordinary history. Beautiful. Honestly, one of the most visually stunning places in the world. Havana with its colourful buildings, its music on every corner, its warm Caribbean light.
The people are known for being warm, creative, resilient. Resilient, able to recover from difficulties. And the nature, coral reefs, tobacco fields, tropical forests. Cuba is extraordinarily beautiful.
Let's recap today's key words. Caribbean, the tropical island region between North and South America. Plantation, a large farm using forced labour.
Poverty, the state of having very little. Corrupt, using power dishonestly for personal gain. Iconic, so famous it becomes a symbol. Guerrilla war, fighting using surprise attacks.
Nationalising, government taking control of private companies. Diplomatic relations, the official connection between two countries. Nuclear, relating to atomic energy.
Embargo, an official ban on trade. Controversial, causing strong disagreement. Resilient, able to recover from difficulties.
So, 12 words, one extraordinary island. Tell us in the comments, did you know this story? Is there any word you didn't understand well? And which country should we visit next?
From where are you listening to our podcast? Tell us, where are you from, friends?
Leave us a like and subscribe to the channel, please.
Stay safe and see you in the next episode.
Stay safe. Kisses.